The blazing sun over Fifth Avenue was merciless, beating down on the crowded streets of New York City. Among the throng of bustling lives, one figure stood out. A man in his late 20s, slumped on the sidewalk with disheveled hair and tattered clothes. His name was Ethan, and his blue eyes, once bright, had dulled with the weight of despair and hunger. His ribs, prominent beneath his worn-out shirt, betrayed weeks of barely scraping by. The scent of sizzling hot dogs wafted through the air, tormenting his empty stomach. "Just one more day, Ethan. Someone will notice you today," he whispered, trying to kindle a flicker of hope. But his inner voice was far less kind. "Who are you fooling? You're invisible." His stomach growled loudly, a sharp reminder of the 2 days he'd gone without food. As the hours dragged on, Ethan's pride, a fragile remnant of his former self, prevented him from asking for help. Across the street, a woman with long brown hair and compassionate green eyes stopped in her tracks. Olivia. Her heart tightened at the sight of the gaunt figure staring into the void. Beside her stood Victoria, her stepmother, an elegant woman with a chillingly cold demeanor. Olivia tugged at Victoria's arm. "We have to help him," Olivia said, her voice quivering with emotion. Victoria sneered, her sharp grey eyes narrowing. "Help? Those people are there because they choose to be." "No one chooses this," Olivia countered, her voice rising. "How can you be so heartless?" Against Victoria's harsh protests, Olivia approached Ethan. Kneeling, she handed him a warm sandwich wrapped in paper. "Here," she said softly. "Please eat." Ethan looked up, his voice trembling. "Thank you. You have no idea what this means to me." For the first time in days, he felt seen. Victoria watched the scene with a calculating gaze. Beneath her outward disdain was a spark of interest, one that harbored a plan, dark and sinister. As they walked away, Victoria's voice turned sickly sweet. "Since you care so much, Olivia, perhaps I should teach you a lesson about these people." The air inside the mansion felt as cold as Victoria's heart. She stormed into the marble-floored entryway, her heels clicking sharply against the tiles. Robert, Olivia's father, emerged from his study, concern etched across his face. "Victoria, what's wrong now?" he asked, his voice weary. "Your daughter," she spat, "has been throwing our reputation in the gutter." Olivia entered behind her, her fists clenched. "I was helping someone in need. Is that such a crime?" she said, defiant. Victoria's lips curled into a mocking smile. "You want to help the less fortunate so badly? Fine. Let's see how far your compassion goes." Turning to Robert, she added, "We've spoiled her. It's time she learns the consequences of her actions." "What are you suggesting?" Robert asked, his voice cautious. Victoria's tone turned icy. "I've found the perfect lesson. We'll arrange a marriage for Olivia, with that beggar she was so eager to save." The room fell silent. Olivia's face drained of color. "You can't be serious," she whispered. "Oh, I'm very serious," Victoria replied, her tone dripping with malice. "Let's see how long your idealism lasts when you're married to someone from the streets." Robert hesitated, his eyes darting between his daughter and his wife. "Victoria, this is extreme. Olivia's just young and kind-hearted." "Kind-heartedness won't protect our reputation, Robert," Victoria snapped. "She's a liability. This will teach her a lesson and protect our family from further embarrassment." "Father, you can't let her do this," Olivia pleaded. But Robert, worn down by years of Victoria's manipulation, looked away. "Perhaps she's right. Maybe you'll learn something from this." The next day, Victoria approached Ethan, finding him sitting on the same street corner. Dressed in a designer coat and heels, she looked out of place amid the grime of the city. "You're the beggar my stepdaughter helped yesterday," she said bluntly. Ethan stood cautiously, his guard up. "Yes, ma'am. My name is Ethan. What do you want?" Victoria smiled, though it didn't reach her eyes. "I have a proposition for you, one that could change your life forever." "What are you talking about?" he asked, suspicion lacing his voice. Victoria wasted no time. My stepdaughter needs to learn her place. I want you to marry her. In exchange, I'll give you money, shelter, a life you could only dream of. All you have to do is say yes. Ethan stared at her, stunned. You're asking me to use someone's kindness against them? To marry your stepdaughter for money? Victoria stepped closer, her tone low and persuasive. Think of what you could do with that money. How many lives you could save. Your friends on the streets, wouldn't they benefit from your sacrifice? Ethan faltered. Her words stirred something deep within him. The image of his companions, hungry and desperate, flashed before his eyes. This doesn't feel right, he murmured. It doesn't have to feel right, Victoria said sharply. It just has to work. Think about it, Ethan. This is your chance to rise above your circumstances, to make a difference. Torn between his principles and the chance to help others, Ethan reluctantly agreed. Fine, he said finally. But I'm doing this for them, not for you. Victoria's smile widened, a predator satisfied with its prey. Good choice. Now let's begin. As she led Ethan away, the wheels of her cruel plan began to turn. The opulence of Victoria's mansion was overwhelming to Ethan as he stepped inside for the first time. The chandelier hanging from the vaulted ceiling, the polished marble floors, and the gleaming antiques all seemed to mock his presence. A butler approached with a measured bow. "This way, sir," the man said, his tone polite but with an unmistakable edge of condescension. Ethan followed silently, feeling out of place in his ragged clothes. He was led to a luxurious bathroom where fresh towels and new clothes awaited him. The mirror reflected a man he barely recognized, grimy, weary, and defeated. Turning on the water, he murmured to himself, "What am I doing here? This isn't me." Scrubbing away layers of dirt and years of street life, Ethan emerged looking like a different person. His hair, once matted, now lay neatly combed. His face, clean-shaven, revealed features even he had forgotten. Putting on the crisp clothes laid out for him, he stared at his reflection. "Who am I pretending to be?" he whispered, his voice thick with doubt. Meanwhile, upstairs, Olivia paced her room. Her mind raced with confusion and dread. Why had Victoria brought Ethan here? What was she planning? When the knock came at her door, Olivia felt her heart drop. "Come in," she said cautiously. Victoria entered, her expression calm yet filled with an unsettling satisfaction. "You'll be pleased to know I've arranged everything," she began. "Arranged what?" Olivia demanded, her voice sharp. Victoria's smile widened. "Your marriage, of course, to the man you were so eager to save." "What?" Olivia's voice rose, trembling with shock and fury. "You can't be serious. This is insane." "On the contrary, dear, it's entirely rational," Victoria replied smoothly. "You'll learn firsthand what it means to be selfless, to live with the consequences of your bleeding heart." "You can't force me to do this," Olivia shouted, tears of frustration forming in her eyes. Victoria leaned in, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "Oh, but I can. If you refuse, I'll make sure Ethan pays the price. Do you think the authorities will hesitate to arrest a homeless man? A planted item here, a convenient call there. It's all so easy." Olivia froze, her breath hitching. "You wouldn't—" Victoria's gaze was unflinching. "Try me." The dining room was uncomfortably quiet as Ethan and Olivia sat across from each other for their first meal together. Victoria presided over the table with a smug smile, savoring her victory. Olivia couldn't bring herself to look at Ethan, her shame and anger boiling beneath the surface. "I'm sorry," Ethan said quietly, breaking the silence. Olivia's head snapped up, her eyes filled with disbelief. "You're sorry? For what? Agreeing to this madness?" "Yes," Ethan admitted. "But I thought maybe I could help people, make something good come out of this." Olivia's voice wavered with emotion. "You think this is noble? This isn't helping anyone. It's just her sick game." Victoria's laughter rang out, cutting through their exchange. "Oh, don't be so dramatic, Olivia. This is exactly what you wanted, to help someone in need. Now you get to do it up close." Olivia's fists clenched under the table. "You'll regret this," she said through gritted teeth, her voice low but firm. "Perhaps," Victoria replied with a shrug. "But for now, I'm enjoying the view." After dinner, Olivia cornered Ethan in the hallway. Her voice was softer now, less accusatory. "Why did you really agree to this?" Ethan hesitated, his eyes avoiding hers. "Because she's right. The money could help so many people. And—" He paused, struggling to find the words. "And I didn't have much choice either." Olivia's anger softened into understanding. "She threatened you too, didn't she?" Ethan nodded. "I couldn't let her hurt my friends. They're all I have." Olivia sighed, her resolve hardening. "Then we'll face this together. But don't think for a second I'll let her win." The days leading up to the wedding passed in a blur. The mansion buzzed with activity as staff prepared for the grand event. Ethan found himself fitted for tailored suits, coached on etiquette, and bombarded with the superficial trappings of a life he never wanted. One evening, as he stood in his new room, Ethan's thoughts drifted back to the streets. The smell of fresh bread, the warmth of a shared meal, the quiet camaraderie of those who had nothing. He clenched his fists, anger burning in his chest. "I can't let this be for nothing," he muttered. Down the hall, Olivia sat by her window, staring out at the sprawling gardens. Her mind churned with plans. She couldn't stop the wedding, but she could expose Victoria for the manipulative monster she was. And maybe, just maybe, she and Ethan could find a way to turn this nightmare into something meaningful. On the day of the wedding, the tension was palpable. As guests began to arrive, whispers filled the air, many wondering why Olivia would marry a man like Ethan. Victoria reveled in the spectacle, greeting attendees with her signature false charm. Ethan stood near the altar, his hands shaking as he adjusted his tie for the 100th time. "You can do this," he whispered to himself. "For Olivia. For the others." When Olivia appeared at the entrance, her radiant dress couldn't hide the determination in her eyes. As she walked down the aisle, her gaze locked with Ethan's. In that moment, a silent promise passed between them. "We'll get through this together." But neither of them knew that the day's events would unravel far more secrets than anyone could have anticipated. The grand hall of the church was suffused with murmurs as the wedding ceremony began. Ethan stood at the altar, his hands trembling slightly. The tailored suit fit him perfectly, but he still felt like an imposter among the aristocrats seated in the pews. Each passing glance from the audience felt like a dagger, their whispered judgments slicing through his resolve. "Why did she choose him?" a woman whispered loudly. "Victoria's always been calculated. There's a reason behind this," another replied. Ethan's jaw tightened, but his thoughts were interrupted as the grand doors creaked open. Olivia entered, walking slowly down the aisle. Her ivory gown flowed like liquid light, but her eyes betrayed a storm of emotion: fear, determination, and defiance. She kept her gaze fixed on Ethan, as if drawing strength from him. Ethan's heart thudded in his chest. In her eyes, he saw not just a victim of Victoria's scheme, but a partner, someone who was fighting the same battle. For a moment, the whispers faded, leaving just the two of them in a silent exchange of understanding. When Olivia reached the altar, the Reverend began the ceremony. But before he could proceed to the vows, a voice rang out, cutting through the tension. "I object!" All heads turned as an elderly man, leaning heavily on a cane, stood up. His voice trembled with emotion, but his eyes were sharp and resolute. Ethan recognized him immediately. It was the man who had approached him days ago with a story that shook his world. "Who are you? And why are you interrupting this sacred ceremony?" Victoria's voice was cold, her mask of calm slipping slightly. The man steadied himself. "My name is Harold Benton, a former friend of Jonathan Howard, Ethan's father." A gasp rippled through the audience. Ethan's breath caught, and Olivia turned to him, her face a mask of confusion. "This man," Harold continued, pointing a gnarled finger at Ethan, "is no beggar. He is Hudson Howard, the long-lost heir of the Howard family. Victoria's face paled, but she quickly regained her composure, her lips curling into a mocking smile. This is preposterous. The ramblings of an old man desperate for attention. Harold's gaze hardened. Preposterous, is it? Then why does Ethan bear the same birthmark as Jonathan's son? The same one that vanished when you, Victoria, conveniently inherited everything after Jonathan's death. The church fell silent, every eye locked on Victoria. Olivia's gaze darted between Ethan and her stepmother, her heart pounding. "Is this true?" she asked, her voice trembling. Victoria laughed hollowly. "Do you really believe this nonsense? That man is a beggar, nothing more." Ethan, emboldened by Harold's words, stepped forward. "I didn't believe it myself at first," he said, his voice steady despite the storm raging inside him. "But it makes sense now. Why I always felt out of place. Why I was abandoned. Harold's story matches fragments of memories I've tried to forget. And that brooch you always wear, Victoria? I remember holding it as a child. It was my mother's." Victoria instinctively clutched the brooch pinned to her chest. Her hand trembled for a split second before she masked it with a sneer. "Coincidences, nothing more. This is absurd," Harold pressed on, his voice rising. "The DNA test will prove it, Victoria. I've already contacted Jonathan's distant relatives. The truth will come out whether you like it or not." Olivia turned to Victoria, her voice filled with anger and disbelief. "How could you? You lied to everyone. My father, me, and now Ethan. You ruined lives for your greed." Victoria's mask of control cracked, fury flashing in her eyes. "I did what I had to. You don't understand the sacrifices I made to secure this family's future." "No, Victoria," Ethan said, his voice cutting through the tension like steel. "You didn't secure a future. You destroyed one. You abandoned me, a child, on the streets to cover your tracks. But the truth is out now, and your power is slipping." The Reverend, visibly shaken, stepped forward. "I think we should pause this ceremony until these matters are resolved." But Victoria wasn't finished. "You think you've won, Ethan? Even if you're Hudson Howard, you're still nothing but a street rat who doesn't belong in this world." Ethan's gaze didn't waver. "You're wrong, Victoria. I belong here because the truth gives me that right. And I'm not alone. Olivia and we're stronger than your lies." The crowd erupted into whispers as Victoria stormed out of the church, her heels echoing on the stone floor. The weight of her unraveling schemes was written on her face, but her exit couldn't erase the truth that had been revealed. As the guests began to disperse, Olivia turned to Ethan, her voice soft but firm. "Hudson or Ethan, it doesn't matter. You're someone who's fought against impossible odds, and that's more important than any name or title." Ethan smiled, a mix of gratitude and relief flooding his features. "And you're someone who stood up for what's right, even when it cost you everything." Hand in hand, they walked out of the church, leaving behind the shattered remnants of Victoria's deception. But they knew this was just the beginning. Together they would face the challenges ahead, not as victims of a cruel plot, but as allies determined to rebuild what had been broken. The truth, once revealed, moved quickly. Days after the dramatic events at the church, Victoria found herself cornered. The DNA test results, prepared in record time with the help of Jonathan Howard's distant relatives, confirmed what Harold had claimed. Ethan was indeed Hudson Howard, the rightful heir to the family's fortune. Victoria's grip on the family's wealth and influence unraveled like a thread in a worn-out tapestry. Olivia, Ethan, and Robert gathered in the family lawyer's office to hear the official confirmation. "The test results are conclusive," the lawyer said, his voice calm but firm. "Ethan is Jonathan Howard's biological son. Legally, he is entitled to reclaim his inheritance." Olivia let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "It's over," she whispered, her voice tinged with relief. Robert turned to Ethan, his eyes filled with regret. "I didn't know, Hudson. I mean, Ethan. I let her control everything, and for that I'm sorry." Ethan placed a hand on Robert's shoulder, his voice steady. "It's not just about the past, Mr. Harrison. It's about what we do now." Meanwhile, the authorities wasted no time investigating Victoria. Evidence piled up quickly: bank transactions, forged documents, and even suspicious details surrounding Jonathan's untimely death. Detectives combed through the mansion, seizing computers, files, and Victoria's prized brooch, which now served as a damning link to her past crimes. Victoria sat in her once grand study, her composure frayed. The echoes of high society's whispers now turned into silence. Her so-called friends had abandoned her. When officers arrived to arrest her, she barely resisted. Her empire of deceit had crumbled, leaving her with nothing but the weight of her actions. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" she hissed at Ethan as she was led away. "Yes," Ethan replied, his voice calm. "I've restored the truth." With Victoria gone, the mansion felt different, a place no longer burdened by secrets. Olivia and Ethan, now united by shared struggles and a mutual desire to rebuild, decided to start fresh. One evening, as they stood together on the mansion's balcony overlooking the sprawling city, Olivia spoke. "Ethan, what do we do now? You have your inheritance, your name. What's next?" Ethan looked out at the lights below, his expression thoughtful. "We use it to make a difference. There are too many people out there living the way I did. Hungry, invisible, hopeless. We can change that." Olivia's eyes sparkled with determination. "Then let's do it. Together." Within weeks, they founded the Howard Harrison Foundation, a charity dedicated to supporting homeless individuals, abandoned children, and anyone struggling to find their way. Shelters were established, offering not just a roof, but also education, counseling, and job training. Ethan took an active role, visiting the shelters and speaking to those who came seeking help. "I know how it feels," he would say. "I've been where you are, and I'm proof that life can change." Olivia, leveraging her social connections, secured funding and partnerships from other prominent families. Her passion and determination inspired others to look beyond their privileges and contribute to a better society. The transformation wasn't just external. Ethan and Olivia grew closer, their bond strengthened by their shared mission. One quiet evening, as they walked through a newly built shelter, Ethan stopped, turning to Olivia. "Olivia, I don't know where I'd be without you. You saw me when no one else did," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "And you taught me to stand up for what's right, no matter the cost," Olivia replied. Their wedding, this time free of manipulation or spectacle, was an intimate ceremony surrounded by friends and supporters who believed in their vision. The vows they exchanged were simple but heartfelt, built on mutual respect and love. Months turned into years, and the foundation flourished. The city began to change, with more families stepping up to help those in need. Ethan became a symbol of resilience, his story proof that even the darkest moments can lead to hope. One evening, as they sat on their porch watching the sunset, Olivia turned to Ethan. "Do you ever think about how all this started?" she asked, smiling. Ethan nodded. "A simple act of kindness. You gave me food when I thought no one cared. It's proof that even small gestures can ripple into something much bigger." Together they turned pain into purpose, proving that even in the face of cruelty and betrayal, love and compassion could prevail. The shadows of the past no longer haunted them. Instead, they served as a reminder of the strength it took to rebuild and the power of doing good. And so, their story became a testament to redemption, resilience, and the lasting impact of kindness, changing not just their lives but countless others for the better. Years had passed, and the impact of Ethan and Olivia's journey echoed far beyond the city. The Howard Harrison Foundation continued to thrive, transforming lives and proving that even in the darkest circumstances, hope could be rekindled. Ethan, now a respected philanthropist, often spoke about his past to inspire others. One evening, as he stood before a crowd at a charity event, he shared a simple but powerful message. "There was a time when I thought I was invisible, that no one cared. But a single act of kindness, a warm sandwich from a stranger, saved me. It reminded me that compassion can change lives. If you take anything from my story, let it be this: never underestimate the power of helping someone." Olivia, standing beside him, added with a smile, "Kindness isn't just an action. It's a legacy. Together we can create a world where no one is forgotten. Their words moved the audience, many of whom left determined to carry forward the couple's mission. As Ethan and Olivia walked hand in hand back to their car that night, Ethan paused, looking up at the stars. "I never thought life would lead here," he said softly. Olivia squeezed his hand. "It's not just about where we've been. It's about where we're going, and who we're helping along the way." Their story wasn't just theirs anymore. It belonged to everyone who believed in the power of kindness, hope, and redemption. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us bring more inspiring stories to life. Together, we can spread positivity, one narrative at a time. Stay tuned for more heartwarming tales.